So first things first, we wanted to start off with OpenSSH today because we do have our SSH folks, I believe, are here. Balu, are you here right now?
Yes, Joey.
Awesome. And I believe, do we have Danny as well?
I am here.
Excellent. Why don't you guys take it away then for me?
Cool. So OpenSSH update. So if you all recall, we mentioned, I think probably a year ago, that we would be including updated bits in the Windows 21 H2 release, which is, I'd say, the last fall release. And then due to some mix-ups with Windows, we didn't actually have some updated bits in 21 or in 20 H2. But now, as of I think 2 weeks ago, the updated bits are included in any version of 20H1 that's gotten the cumulative update for April. So the new bits should include Windows 8 or OpenSSH 8.1 and any version that is a 20H1 version that has been that's on the latest update. Additionally, we are hard at work on 8.6. And so the 8.6 release for Win32 OpenSSH should be out on GitHub, I'd say, in the next week or so. We're just putting the last finishing touches on the release, like licensing and things like that. So look for that release coming soon.
Danny, you said that was the 8.1 update pushed down to all machines down to 20H1?
Yes.
Got it.
And then the 8.6 will be out in beta on GitHub in the next few weeks.
And this does mean, Danny, that I think that do we want to talk about 21H2 here?
Sure. So due to the Windows release cycle, because we like to bake our OpenSSH versions on the GitHub beta release before we include them in the Windows releases, and just due to the Windows release scheduling, 8.6 will not be in the 21H2 release. So that we'll have to wait until the 22H1 release for the 8.6 update into Windows.
Awesome. Balu, did you have anything else that you wanted to add here?
That's all, Joey. Danny covered most of it.
All right, and we do usually hold Q&A till the end, but if anybody has questions on OpenSSH, because some of these folks do have to get running, is there anything, can anybody like raise a hand if they've got a question on OpenSSH right now, or drop it in the chat? Awesome. All right, well, thank you, folks. I really appreciate it, and we're going to go ahead and keep moving here. If anybody does think of anything...
I will be dropping off. Just let me know in case if you have any questions.
Appreciate it.
We just got a question. X509 cert auth.
Oh, yeah. Did we lose Balu already?
I'm here.
Someone's asking about X509 cert support.
Okay, I'm not aware of this. I will have to spend some time and then get back to you.
If there's an open issue, we'll definitely maybe link it here and we'll check it out there. Justin Grody says OpenSSH, future 8.6, etc. How far down level will it be supported to be installed?
Yeah, so the way that the Windows, I'd say, support or release lifecycle kind of works is only the newer updates get the latest updates of OpenSSH, unless we take, I'd say, alternative action, which is for us, it's a change request back onto back versions of Windows, and that's actually how we got the 8.1 release into 20H1. We definitely want to do another I did backporting of functionality just so we're kind of consistent across the board on Windows versions and SSH versions.
So Danny, just to interject real quick, Justin is clarifying that he's talking about manual out-of-band install, not expecting it via optional feature or Microsoft update. So
yes.
I think we're talking about down level, which is something that we have not historically supported.
Yeah, so for down level, I would generally say we don't support it, especially on the beta releases, given that everything on a GitHub release is an unsupported version. I generally look at what version that we're shipping in Windows for whatever Windows version you're on. Anything of that version or newer is what we're going to support.
I think the higher level point here, Danny, is that we do not support install to outside of something being in box.
Yeah.
Right. So while the bits are there and you can play with them and you can preview them, you can't like you can go rock on with your chocolatey package and trust what you want to trust with regards to that. But it's not a platform that we're testing on frequently enough for us to be confident in saying that we definitely support it as a company. Right.
Yes. That going back into the back releasing, if we do that, then 8.6 would be supported. But at this point, any of those releases are not supported for manual install.
There is one exception there, Danny, which I believe is the Azure SSH extension, VM extension.
Yeah, so we have an 132 OpenSSH extension that you can pull down from the Azure Gallery if you are running on an Azure machine or you have an Arc enabled server. You can pull down the SSH extension, and that is supported. That is currently on version 7.7, but we are working on updating that.
Awesome. All right, with that, I'm checking the comments here. What is the timeline to have a non-beta release? I think we just said it's going to not be 21H2, but probably 22H1 or whatever the equivalent is.
Yes, 4.8.6, 4.8.1. If you're on the latest, you should already have the updated OpenSSH version.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and jump into Working Groups Community Update. This is one we've been talking about for a while here. I imagine that there may be some questions on this today. Basically, we wanted to provide the update that this is something we're moving on. We've sent out an invitation to a very small number of folks around the Engine Working Group and are working right now to incorporate them as part of that. We don't want to share it until we have kind of a public forum set up around it, but we are sending out a couple more invites over the course of the next couple weeks. We're kind of doing this in a bit of a staged approach just to dip our toes in and make sure we're not dealing with 12 folks at the same time kind of thing. But we're very motivated here to get this done. I would say, at a high level, this is something that's been important to us for a super long time. But given some of the discussion that was taking place on Twitter in the last couple weeks on GitHub, it was definitely something that we decided to bump up our priority queue, right? So I'll say it's been something that's kind of continued to fall down the list for me, over other features and stuff like that. But it's definitely the only way I think that we're ultimately going to scale out to the number of issues and pull requests that we've been receiving in the repo, and to come up with a way to incorporate more community feedback and autonomy into the working group. So I kind of skipped over here a little bit. What a working group is essentially a subcommittee, with regards to the overall PowerShell repo. So if you see here in PowerShell and we hop over to the issues, you can see that we have a number of labels that were formerly area labels. So some of these are still vestiges, kind of legacy for some of the things that haven't mapped over to the working group system quite yet. But you see here these working groups around the developer experience or the engine, or interactive aspects of PowerShell, or remoting and security, things like that. So this is sort of the first line of defense, these working groups against, or not defense, but the first line of triage, really, for a lot of these issues and pull requests coming in these various working groups. So you're going to see these folks kind of making decisions about whether bugs are a high priority, or whether or not a feature should require an RFC in order to move forward, or whether a feature proposal fits with the overall design principles of PowerShell, those sorts of things. And we really, this is for folks who have kind of demonstrated a lot of not only knowledge in the community, but also a lot of consensus building and really strong ability to kind of navigate some of these discussions, particularly when they get more and more contentious, and folks are kind of looking to find that consensus and that decision around issues. So the goal here is to come to conclusions around issues quicker, and to deal with this rapidly increasing number on both of these issues and pull requests have sort of ballooned out of control for us. So something we want to get a handle on. And again, some of you may even be getting some emails from me over the course of the next couple of weeks asking to help out here. So Steve, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, so on the quote-unquote community update, based on some of the discussion that was happening on Twitter. So for me, I think I think the working groups is one aspect, and I want to maybe cover that in more detail. Like, I think one of the feedback that we got is that people are not happy with certain decisions like the committee was making, or individuals on the PowerShell team. So I think having community members on the working groups really empowers the community to have a voice. And again, we are limiting it to certain folks that have proven themselves to be very productive. And also good collaborators from the community, and we're going to start reaching out to more folks over time. So hopefully that will help remediate some of that concern. The other concern that was shared was really about PowerShell 7 versus Windows PowerShell versus module compatibility, and a big one that people are talking about is Microsoft 365. So those commandlets and modules are not open source, so we can't be as transparent about what's happening there. But again, we are having conversations with those teams. I can't provide like any timeline or roadmap on when things get better, but things are happening, and being a big enterprise, things aren't going to happen as quickly as you guys want. So
yeah, it's actually an area where it's very difficult to convey this, unfortunately, but it's an area where I feel like we have more traction than ever. This is something very similar to Azure PowerShell, where there's sort of a wide set of modules are being managed in kind of different ways, and so we've been trying to play as active a role as possible, and M365 has been very amenable to this in terms of coming up with some consistency and standards around all those modules, and helping drive them towards modernization effort across the board to be work with PowerShell 7 and support a wider set of these kind of newer REST APIs that are coming out. And to do that as consistently as possible. So that is absolutely happening, despite some of the dragging our feet in some of those places. This is, like Steve said, it's a big ship. It takes a while to steer. I know that this one is probably rife with questions, so I'm happy if folks want to raise their hands or hop in here, for a couple minutes.
Somebody watching
Yeah, can we make sure? I'm going to do a quick mute here. No problem. So Jake asks, once identified community members are identified and brought, quote, on board, where will that list be surfaced so we know who the community contacts are? So that's part of the second half is what we're figuring out right now. The first half is in a pull request that I am planning to get merged ASAP. And I will drop links here to both of these pull requests. There is a PR around working groups in the PowerShell repo, and this is actually includes the categorization of the working groups, what they are and who are on them. This list will get those community people added when that's finalized. So if you look here in the files, you'll actually see, I'm going to go ahead and drop this one in here, and we'll drop this one in here. But yeah, there's actually, if I scroll down here, Let's actually zoop this file up. He is not having it today. I think I skipped it. Yep. So some of these, like here you'll see security working group. Here's a description of what it is. And, here are the members that are on there, their GitHub usernames. So we want to have kind of like a public area where working groups can do some of their discussion, because some of this discussion doesn't necessarily take place in issues. It's about around the logistics of, how to handle things above the issues. And so, we're trying to figure out where that is today. But you would see, after this being merged, you would see pull requests to this document, approved by the committee and merged by the maintainers to add names to these lists for some of these. So today, these are all Microsoft employees that are on this list. And it was always our plan, Delta, a couple folks like Bruce, who's on the committee. But it's always our plan to add community folks to this. It's just a matter of, sort of sequencing, and we're pushing harder there to get them added onto this list. Didn't mean for that one. Cool. Any other questions on any of this? I will also drop in. Steve, if you see one pop, can you let me know?
I'll let you know.
I can never remember the plurality. I never get it right. There we go. Great.
And now you know why PowerShell is singular.
Yes, exactly. No, I've thought about it many, many times about how that's the one I want. Yep. Cool. Highly engaged, and we're making progress there. All right, we're gonna keep moving then. Crescendo Preview 2. Jason and Jim, you want to take it away for me?
Sure. I think Jason's out this morning. He asked me to.
Oh yes, that's right. Thank you. Yeah.
Talk briefly about it. So we released Preview 2 of Crescendo last week or the week before, and this one was really focusing on allowing the configuration to specify elevation. So you get to choose how you want to elevate if you need to. I provided a scaffold function to use start process on Windows. It's a simple function, but it kind of illuminates some of the problems that you have to worry about when you do elevation on Windows, or you attempt elevation on Windows. But it's flexible enough to use whatever elevation technology that you've got. And we've provided a number of examples in the samples directory to show people how it's done.
And that's with run as and sudo.
It's actually with start process.
Oh. Okay.
So start process with a credential. It was just a scaffolding. There's issues with regard to elevation on Windows, there's a discussion in our repository about it. But it's if you have a tool that does elevation on Windows, you can and it's a command line tool, of course, you can pretty much easily specify it in the configuration. Next preview, we're going to try to address issues with regard to the output handling and make some improvements there and hopefully make that a little bit easier, allow you to use your own scripts if you've got one, or functions, as well as the inline code that we have. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Definitely check out Crescendo, folks. This is chugging along, and I know a lot of folks have said, hey, there's all these great native utilities out there that, really should have more PowerShell support. And, there's like how do we catch up, quote unquote, to these folks that are out there building, a kubectl faster than we can wrap it in commandlets. And, one of those strategies, I think, is Crescendo. And I think it's going to play heavily to the fact that there is an extremely large ecosystem of CLI utilities out there, and there's no reason why we can't PowerShellize this very easily, and it's even easier when community folks are kind of built up around collaborating on these Crescendo wrappers. So definitely play with it. And, for those CLI utilities that you're using every single day as part of your PowerShell workflow, might be worth experimenting to see how easily and quickly you can wrap them with this awesome module. So give it a peek. I'm going to check for questions. Awesome. There's this one question for the community. Okay. Plans to address the backlog of needs, triage issue, and longstanding PRs in a structured way. My team has struggled with a similar problem in our move towards community data sets help, so I'm deeply sympathetic. Also recognize the warning about community health that it represents. Yeah, so Lombardi, this is really around, the working group stuff that we're trying to do, right? And the plan here is to just get as many people as possible eyeballs on this, and really to scale out and give the power to make decisions to folks that are not on our immediate team, right? And I think that's really the only way that we're going to be able to deal with this backlog. But also having this forcing function of folks outside, people with different schedules, people with different, cadences of how they want to triage, all those things are going to help drive just more consistency in the overall triage effort, and make sure that things that might not at first glance be as important to us are getting raised up by people with, in positions of authority who recognize that maybe there's something we missed there, right? Awesome. We're going to keep cranking. Secret Management 1.1 design change affecting extensions. I don't know if Paul or Sydney's driving this one, but whoever, if you want to take it away.
I think Paul was going to provide the update on this one.
Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll just describe the issue real quickly. So this is an issue in secret management, and just real quickly, what secret management is basically an orchestration of extension vaults. Extension vaults can be registered in secret management that are used to, store and retrieve secrets either locally or remotely. And extension vaults, can be written by third parties and can be registered to be used in secret management. So what extension vaults are just basically PowerShell modules that implement functions that are required for it to act like a vault for secret management. And so the way that secret management currently use these extension vault modules is that it loads them into the same session, the same current user session. And whether or not that was the right design decision is arguable, and I won't get into the pros and cons of that. But that's just kind of how it's working today. And it turns out that there is a problem with that design approach. And the problem is that it prevents secret management from working within what we call constrained language mode. And just real quickly, what is constrained language mode? Is something that's available cross-platform, but really is only used in Windows under a what we call a application control policy or a CI policy. And real quickly, what a CI policy is, sorry about that noise. Okay, so what is the CI policy? CI policy is basically a way to lock down a machine, and it's an application control policy, right? And it has to be system-wide. And just real quickly, when a Windows machine is locked down using a CI policy, what that means is that any script or module that is trusted by the CI policy is loaded and run in PowerShell in full language mode with all abilities. If it's not trusted by the CI policy, the script or module is loaded and run in constrained language mode. So it's severely constrained in how it can run. And this is just kind of a security boundary that we enforce. So what is the problem? And the problem is that secret management, which we sign and is designed to run in constrained language mode, doesn't run in constrained language mode. And the reason it doesn't run is because of the way that secret management hosts these extension vault modules. Yeah, go ahead and jump in. Just, interrupt me if there's a question if you want me to stop. Otherwise, I'm just going to plow on. Okay, so that's where the issue is. The issue is that secret management, it doesn't run in constrained language mode. We want it to. Looking into
is that, Paul, is that because the extensions need to run in full language mode in some cases?
No, it's actually. I can get into the details, but it's kind of it's really kind of not clear. You could say that it's a bug in PowerShell being too restrictive in how it enforces constrained language mode. It was intended for secret management to work, but it doesn't. I can get into the details. I don't know if it's really worthwhile to right now, but just to say that it doesn't work, and it's related to the way that loads modules into the current user session. Okay, and so what I would like to do is change secret management so that it will run in a CI policy constrained language mode. And in order to do that, I need to make a change in how these extension vault modules are run. And so instead of being run in the current user session, it's run into a separate session as defined by a run space. And just real quickly, what is a run space? A run space is just a context in PowerShell in which scripts run. It contains all state information, variables, and modules that are loaded and that sort of thing. And it's really an isolation layer. And so when you're running PowerShell and a command shell in a window, you're running in a run space session. But PowerShell actually allows you to create any number of run space sessions within a process. So okay, so that's the describe what the breaking change is, describe what the fix would be to do that, and it's a fairly significant change. Again, the change is instead of running and loading extension vault modules in the current user session, it runs it in a separate session, a dedicated run space session. And so why does that break, and what breaks? And so arguably that should be a fine change to make, whether it runs into the current user session or a dedicated, separate run space session, shouldn't really affect how extension modules run. But when I was experimenting, it turns out that it does. And one of the extension vault modules that breaks is the KeyPass vault module. And for a very good reason. And so I investigated why that breaks with this change that I was discussing, and what it really comes down to is, I don't want to get into too many details, I'll go on too long, but really what comes down to is that Justin Grody, who implemented the KeyPass vault, needed a way to unlock the vault, and basically pointed out a deficiency in what I think is in secret management. So one of the changes I want to make, besides this breaking change, is another change that fixes this issue so that the KeyPass vault can more easily perform this function, which is called unlock the vault. And just real quickly, what does unlock the vault means is that, vaults definitely, have to have some sort of security boundary, and usually there's some sort of way to get access to the vault through a password or token or some sort of authorization or authentication scheme. And once that is done, then the vault is unlocked and can be usable. And there's a couple of ways to unlock a vault. One is you can prompt the user, and that's usually how you see that when you're using PowerShell interactively and secret management interactively. But you also want to be able to use secret management in unattended script and without user interaction, in which case it has to go through an API. So in any case, that's the issue. The issue is that So the change is that how extension vaults are loaded and run, and it can be a breaking change. And the breaking change that I did find with KeyPass, I think, can be mitigated with another change, which is not breaking, it's just addition, and it's just basically adding support to secret management for this unlock vault function. So I think I'll better stop at this point and just see if I've lost anybody, if anybody has any questions. And then basically, really what I want to get is some feedback on whether to move forward with this. If there's community saying, don't do this, it's really going to break things, or it's just is too much of a disruption, or just what the community thinks about this kind of a change.
Paul, I did want to just link to the. I wanted to link to the issue here. Is it this one right here, or is there another one with more context on some of this?
Yeah, that's the one that I just created real quickly. Yeah, to track it.
Okay, but there wasn't a conversation happening in one of these other issues about it.
Yeah, there was actually an issue in Secret Store.
Okay, so this is the
that,
one that you probably linked to here. This one.
Yeah. So that was
Okay.
the original one where a user was saying, yeah, this doesn't work in this this SAW mode or in this mode where PowerShell is running in a application control policy.
Cool.
So basically, what this means is that if I make this change, the KeyPass Vault will not fully work. I mean, it works really well, but just one function, this unlock function, won't work correctly. And so the question is, we can mitigate that, we can fix that, but if I make this change to secret management, and if you're using KeyPass Vault, what that will mean is a couple of things. One, that KeyPass Vault will have to be updated to take advantage of this mitigation, this fix for it, before it'll work fully with the new secret management version. And is that okay? Is that acceptable by the community?
Yeah, and we'll obviously have more guidance there as this becomes more concrete about how you might be able to, test and what you're going to need to change if things break and all that sort of stuff. So, thank you, Paul. Did we have any questions on this one? Awesome. PowerShell Get V3 update. This is Sydney and/or Amber. You want to take this one away?
Yeah. I can start with the update, and then Amber or Paul or anyone who wants to add can go ahead and add in as well. But the main update here is that a ton of work has gone into this module's development over the last month since we last talked. It might not seem like it because I know we still haven't had a major preview update. But if you are a close follower of our GitHub, you'll notice that a few big PRs have been merged in, and there's a few big ones open that are undergoing code reviews at the moment. If you're curious of the particular place we're at, we are getting into the code review phase of Find, which is probably the biggest, most complex commandlet in our interface. And from there, we'll really be in the home stretch towards having that next major preview update. When we do ship out that preview update, it will have the entire commandlet interface completed after our refactor. So once we hit that stage, we'll be really looking for tons of feedback so that we can sort of quickly progress towards a GA state on the module. With that, I guess, Amber and Paul, if any of you have anything you'd like to add as well.
I'd just like to say that as we're going about refactoring these commandlets, we're also taking a look at any GitHub issues that are open for them or suggestions or bug fixes, I guess, that you guys had posted or let us know about. So we'll definitely be taking a look at that too. And then when those PRs get merged in, we are noting whatever issues they fix if they do fix issues in those PRs.
Awesome. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing all the circles here, but please do make sure you mute if you're not currently talking. Cool. Thank you guys so much. So when should we? Did you say this? Did I miss it? When we should expect the next preview, Sydney?
We don't have a firm date at this point, but hopefully in June. I'd love to see an update.
Yeah, I guess all thing I would say is that the refactoring work and the kind of some of the redesign work is a fair amount of work, but it's going really well. I think we're making really good progress. So yeah, I think what Sydney is saying is a reasonable time to see the next preview release.
Awesome. Any questions on that from folks here in the chat? I'm just talking about the issue. Cool. We're going to go through the GitHub questions at the end, right? Okay, we're just talking about secret management. Great. Keep those conversations going. Awesome. We now have community demos. Sydney, who do we have lined up today?
Yeah, so first up we have Michelle, and then we will have Gail up next, and then if time, Justin Grody.
Awesome. I literally blanked on the middle name. You just said
Gail.
Gail, thank you so much. Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Awesome. Take it away, Michelle.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle. I'm currently working for the team called Guest Configuration, and we provide tools for users to manage their VMs at scale. I've been at Microsoft for almost 2 years now, and the PM on my team's name is Michael Green, if y'all are familiar with him. And right now I'm working with the team to enable the set scenario, and so that's what I'm trying to demo today. Some updates to the guest configuration commandlets that will enable users to create and manage packages and policies with commandlets as opposed to manually. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly. This one right here. Okay, hopefully you can see this screen. I kind of set up this directory so we can test out what's in it. Right now I just have an example package of like a package that I had made to, and all it does is it checks if a file exists, and if it doesn't exist, it should create that file. And also this, I'm going to delete this because we will be creating that. Okay, excuse me. So the first thing that you would need to do if you wanted to use these commandlets is you could get the new updated version of the guest configuration module from the PowerShell gallery. I can post a link in the chat later, but you can also run this command to grab the pre-release version of guest configuration. So let's see if that works on my machine, but since I already have it, I'm going to just cancel out of that. And then right now, the features that we have published as pre-release are hidden as experimental features so that users who currently have the module don't accidentally somehow trigger the our commandlets that are only like, it's in pre-release, so we don't want any users to accidentally use them and get confused. So here, if I call get experimental feature, I have already turned on guest configuration set scenario. So if you haven't already turned that on, some of you may already be familiar, you can turn that on with enable experimental feature. Oops. That would look like this. And as you can see, mine's already true. The next step, I'm going to make sure that my module path, my PS module path has the example package that I have created, so that in my example it would be my file DSC, and then we can go ahead and get started. So we already have a package called new guest configuration package, and what that commandlet does is it creates a package for the user. So what we have done so far is we added a new parameter called type, and this type is going to let users specify whether or not they want their package to be a package that only audits or audits and additionally will perform the set action. So if your package is not set to audit and set and you run the set action on that package, it shouldn't work. So in this example, I set the type to audit and set, and so I'm going to press enter now. I believe another new update is that the new guest configuration. Oh yeah, so I'm going to save the output of the new guest configuration package into this variable called package so we can keep using it for the future. And as you can see, after running this commandlet, I can see the example package here. And if we click into it, we can see the moth file has been generated correctly. And the metaconfig.json will have the words type audit and set in here, so that this is what we will be using later on in the package to make sure that we are only running the correct type of commands on this. So if it had only said audit, then for example, we can't run start on it. Okay. So to make things a little bit more interesting, I'm going to create a parameter such that when I run the package, I want the file to be set in a specific location as opposed to what the moth file currently says. So let's say I want the output of the file I'm creating to be in the current directory and in a subdirectory called test package test. So I'll create this output path where I want it to go. Output path. So that would be this directory test package test. And then I will actually create that parameter object to be put into our commandlets. So this is what the parameter object would look like. We want to ensure that the file is present. So if we wanted to delete it, we'd say absent. We want to ensure that it gets created at this location, and the contents of the file will say hello PowerShell folks. Okay, so as some of you may already know, we already have a commandlet called test guest configuration package, and that has not updated. Nothing about this commandlet has necessarily updated in changes facing the user. So for example, if I were to run this, it would do exactly what it did before, which is test that the contents are all accurate and we have the correct dependencies, and it also returns the compliance status as false. And what that is saying is, no, there does not exist a file in this directory that contains these contents yet. So now moving on to the star of the show, that would be the actual start commandlet that we had written, and that would be this. So we have this new commandlet called start guest configuration package remediation. We point to the path of the package. So as I had saved earlier, the package, and we grab the path, and then we pass this parameter object that we just created. We also want to run force because it will be modifying the machine. So if you don't run force, it won't work. So let's press enter here. And as you can see, the output from my module, I just had a print statement saying that the module is loading, and it created this directory, and it made sure to create this file that says hello PowerShell folks. We can also test that this has worked correctly with PowerShell, or even better, we have a new commandlet called get guest configuration compliance status. So if I were to run this, it says true that this directory does exist. So if I were to modify parameters to instead of saying that the property should be present and then it should, let's say it should be absent, for example. So let's go ahead and paste this parameter and then change this to say absent. And then we run the get on the get compliance status. Now it says false because we're asking if the path does not exist, but it actually does exist, or the file does exist. So that's why I returned false here. Yeah, so that's we still have to implement a couple of commandlets, such as new guest configuration policy and publish policy. But yeah, this is what we have so far, and yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. Really excited for these features. We've been, yeah.
I think we should maybe go to some of the questions in the RFC rather than more demos right now.
I hear you. I want.
Otherwise, there'll be another Twitter storm.
I hear you. I'm in the same place, and
Right.
Yeah. I want to be respectful to Gail as well. But Gail, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we're going to cover more of this during the next DSC community call. So I'm going to post the link, and then we can cover that in this call.
Thank you. Apologies, Gail. We ran a little bit long here, but we do want to talk about some of these questions. So I want to address. I did a little bit of scrolling through the Q&A again just now to see some stuff that people have responded over the last night and that sort of thing. So, I think it's interesting here some of what's being discussed, because I think that a lot of folks mean a lot of different things from what they're saying, right? So there's a lot of different questions here about whether, hey, is Microsoft committed to PowerShell? I'll tell you unequivocally that the answer to that question is yes, right? We're working. We have a whole team, working on PowerShell. I've grown my team over the last year. Steve's grown his team over the last year. And I think that, in many cases, these things, there's a perception, I think, that, hey, the thing that I really, really care about isn't moving, and therefore, there's underinvestment, right? And we really want to see, like why hasn't my thing moved yet, right? And I think a lot of this is totally fair, and this is why we spoke to the idea of working groups and why we need to look at more of these things and how do we scale up to a larger set of things. I've spoken in the past on the fact that, hey, we can add 100 people to the team, right? But at the end of the day, it's gonna grow the set of issues. It's gonna grow the number of PRs that come in, right? Everything is gonna scale up with that, and there's gonna be a new capacity problem to deal with, right? So it's really about the processes and about making sure that people can be heard when it's appropriate, right? And that not every single issue is going to be of equal importance as every other issue, right? That's just a reality that we have to deal with. But again, we recognize here that there's an over backlog. We're changing our processes, right? This working group stuff, like this, is intended to address this problem. Now, with regards to, I also see there's another angle of the conversation, which is like, well, like Microsoft is documenting things in other languages, and sometimes even before PowerShell. And this is okay, right? And I think it's not, I see people talk about Python a lot, and it sounds like that there's some pockets of the community where Python documentation is coming in slightly earlier, or maybe completely in lieu of PowerShell documentation, right? This is not the case across all of Microsoft. And I can tell you very flatly that there is probably 10 to 100 times as much PowerShell documentation as there is Python documentation, right? Similarly, people talk to Azure CLI versus Azure PowerShell, which is kind of a false dichotomy. I think plenty of folks love using Azure CLI within PowerShell, and I think that there are good reasons to. We work well with CLI utilities and JSON and that sort of thing. And if it's your preference, by all means, both of them are ultimately to achieve a job. And if you can do the thing that you need to do in PowerShell, excellent. But even beyond that perception, Azure PowerShell has better coverage of ARM than Azure CLI today, and has for a very long time. And there are some exceptions to this rule, AKS, for instance. But as you've seen, like, it takes a while to write the ship, but there's been some major updates filling in some of the gaps on AKS. And that's been a priority to that team for a long time. It's just not something that they've gotten to until very recently. And that was actually just pure coincidence. That wasn't as a response to anything. But there's going to be more az.aks, updates over the course of the next month. Similar with the M365 stuff. I think, unfortunately, we had Jeffrey drop here, but he's played a very pivotal role from within, his organization to, help move the M365 stuff forward. And no one has disagreed at all, right? This is something that everyone agrees is a place where, we want to continue to invest more going forward. So I think that sometimes there's there are realities to what's being discussed for sure, right? But there is also a bit of a perception problem, and I think folks have maybe had a tendency to, really sort of jump on this train of, and there's this other thing that I've been, upset about, and that's, I understand why that is, and I think a lot of these concerns, like I said, are reasonable, but it's going to take us time to get to where we want to be, and we also don't want to just spew a bunch of meaningless words, right? The reason that we've kind of sat down and taken a collection from ourselves is because we want to move on this working group stuff, right? We can sit here and say in the community calls or on Twitter or whatever, it's happening or we're making progress, but at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words, and that's why we're really trying to just do the actions, get people on board, demonstrate progress on some of this, and really show folks that we're serious about what we're talking about. Because the community aspect of the open source project has always been, extremely important to us. I'm an OSS guy. Like, I came up on Freenode and Linux boot CDs and all that stuff. Like, I understand the sort of corporate V community aspect, and I get how we've gotten here, and it wasn't ever the intention. We've been playing lots of catch up, and we need to take stock. Get over the line with folks from the community being in positions of formal authority and move forward from here. So hopefully that wasn't waxing too poetic. And Steve, if you want to make any comments, but I'm also open to any kind of questions here. So
yeah, I guess the only thing I'll just add is I think a lot of the feedback has coming from a lot of long-term Windows PowerShell users, where Windows was the predominant operating system. And that was kind of like a focus around Microsoft. So we had stuff like, the CEC. We required a lot of teams to produce Windows PowerShell modules, and they did. They did all that work. Microsoft as a company has changed quite a bit over the last few years, right? Rather than just kind of trying to focus on the Windows customers, really looking at bringing other customers who are not classic Windows or Microsoft customers to Microsoft. And that includes stuff like embracing Python, CLI, Linux. There's a reason WSL is in Windows now and stuff like that. So it is a transformation. I don't think that diminishes PowerShell at all. As Joey said, we work closely with the Azure Powershell team. They have, as I believe, 100% coverage on the management plane for ARM, with the exception of AKS perhaps. But they're continuing to drive that, and there's a team behind that. We are again starting some efforts, or we have had some efforts with M365, and some of that will take longer than you would like, and longer than I would like. And there's also just really hard technical problems where a lot of the teams that have Windows PowerShell modules depend on .NET Framework APIs that .NET Core or .NET 6 at this point is never going to support. So it's very hard for them to just shift that overnight. But things are happening, and hopefully things get better over time.
So
yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so I work at Puppet. My day job is open source. I get it. I understand exactly how that situation happens. But one thing I kind of want to focus on from the community perspective here, I guess the question that I want to ask is how are we measuring or tracking the accountability for the working groups, right? This is something that has been coming for 5 years and is still in some ways coming. And so I'm just kind of how are you measuring if this is successful? What does that look like? What is the commitments to accountability that the team is making to kind of keep from bleeding more senior community members and addressing the root problems that led to those leavings?
Well, I could say right up front what it's probably not, right? And it's probably not what people would immediately jump to, which is, issue number went down, right? Or PR number went down, right? That is a number that we were going to want to track, but it's not an indication of any kind of health, right? We can come in and just force close a bunch of issues, and it's not going to address what people want. I will say that part of being successful is going to be saying no a lot more, right? And it is going to come into conclusions faster, have good reasons why discussions should continue or should not continue. Steve, I think that's
it's not me.
Can we get a mute, please, from whoever is playing? Thank you. So, I think, at the risk of totally dodging your question, one of the things that's really important to me as we bring folks on is that they tell us whether or not this process works at all, right? And I want that to be the sort of first line feedback here is, hey, is what we're proposing to do from a triage perspective reasonable? Do you find it reasonable? Can you, do you feel like this is actually making any kind of progress from the perspective of a community member who's embedded in this thing, right? I don't, and I'm open to feedback here, but it's my experience that putting sort of SLAs or time limits on PRs and issues is also not something that is particularly helpful, given that some of them are much larger or much smaller in scope than others. We can take an approach like VS Code has done with a bot, to sort of put time limits on responses and that sort of thing. But again, I don't think that, issue burn down is an indication of health. So, it's a really good question, and I don't have a great answer today. Yeah.
In the interest, since we're going to run out of time here, let me just add one quick thing. So I think a lot of the process changes with the working groups, I think maybe the working group name is masquerading a lot of the other changes that we made, right? Which is we also recognize that we don't want people in the community to spend a lot of time on a pull request only to get it rejected for whatever reason, right? Maybe it's not consistent with PowerShell, maybe it's not good design, whatever the case may be. So some of the changes there is really pushing some of that discussion into issues or using the discussion features on GitHub so that the community with the team can decide, hey, this makes a lot of sense, or maybe we need to refine this, because it's much, quote unquote, cheaper to kind of say no at that point than to have someone spending, a weekend or weeks onto code, and unfortunately decide later on, from our point of view, that's not the right thing. So I think those things are happening. I know that there are always going to be some folks, unfortunately, that don't like some of the decisions being made. But I think we also need to recognize that there has been a large number of community contributions that have shipped in PowerShell, right? And I think that there's been a lot of focus on some of the times we said no, and yes, people get upset. But there's a lot of times where we said yes, and we helped them with our engineering efforts to get it in. And those aren't celebrated as much as the negativity, in my opinion. So. I don't mean to kill the conversation with that, but
yeah, no, that wasn't intended to. Yeah, for sure. But it's
I have a follow up to your previous answer. So initially, whenever we were asking our questions in the past, we were told that the PowerShell team was under-resourced, which is why I brought up the question. And it sounds like from what you said that it's no longer under-resourced. Is that the case?
If I recall correctly, I don't believe anybody's been talking about under-resourcing since the DSC resource kit. If they have, I'm surprised to hear that. But
okay.
It was a lot of that was, I think, around the 120 some odd modules we were shipping in the resource kit. Folks were talking about X exchange and when are we going to drop the X, and what's the sort of longer term thing there. I mean, our team since the Windows module effort, we've leaned into prioritizing or leaned into just doing the work on behalf of a lot of other teams, right? I mean, the Windows modules, a ton of them work the way that they do, Active Directory included. I think Steve was actually the one that did a bunch of that work where we said, hey, here's the code. We fixed it. Please ship it, right? And that's the kind of thing that we're leaning into here. Same with the M365. Like, we want to be very, very hands-on there. I mean, everyone at Microsoft feels under-resourced. I will tell you that right now. And a lot of, you'd be surprised at what you'd hear from some of the folks that, people say, oh, I see this documentation over there for this thing and it doesn't include PowerShell. And, in some of those cases, I know those teams and I know that they're, that they've talked to us about how can we have as much documentation as PowerShell has, or how do we get people to be as engaged? We feel like we're on an island at Microsoft because we're the Python folks and, people care more about the PowerShell folks or whatever. So it's definitely a grass is greener thing, and everybody feels under-resourced. Everybody wants more, commitment to their thing. But I think that the point here is that there are processes that we can put in place that help us accomplish more with the same set of people. Right. And that's really the key piece here. And I think, like we were saying earlier, was saying no quicker. Right. Like, people are upset about PRs not going in, not because in many cases because they're not going in, but because it took them 15 hours of work to get to the point where they got that no. And I get that. That's bad. So we want to be able to avoid that lost effort up front and have folks be on the same page before effort is done and whatever. But sorry, I kind of got away from your question a little, Christy. But yeah, I don't.
No, you answered it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I don't think. No worries. Did you have a follow-up there? Yep. Please, Mike.
Hey, so guys, understand where I'm coming from. I'm sort of an outsider here. I'm not at the high level that some of these people are, where I feel comfortable to write meaningful code that could ship into the product. But I appreciate the work that gets done, and I also spend a ton of time in the community and feel the passion of the people that are in the community. And I kind of feel like I want to find a way to bridge the gap between a team that seems to want to do the right thing and a community that really wants the great things to happen. So I guess I just want to reinforce the point that probably a lot of people may be worried to say, which is those working groups that you guys are talking about and working on, they're really important to the community, and they would like to see some movement. And if you show some movement, I think everybody would feel like things are happening for the better. So you're right, Joey. The product and the organization has grown bigger, but more issues come, and it's hard to keep up with all that. But I just know that from hearing from back channels, there's a lot of people that feel like they want to do more, and they're just having a hard time getting to be part of your, let's say, team or ecosystem. So I think for you guys, those working groups, it would be a big carrot stick to give to people in the community. And obviously everything can't happen in one day, but I think a lot of people are hoping that works in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with all that, Mike. And I definitely, and I think, this is why I didn't come out and write a big blog post on day one to say, but we're doing working groups, right? Because as everyone's saying, actions speak louder than words. And that's why we're having these conversations with some folks now, and those are going to just increase. Lombardi, you had a question here about the, sort of why is your first PR easier to merge than your fifth, and why as people become more capable, it seems harder. I don't know that I've seen that necessarily in one-to-one like you're talking about, but if I had to guess, it's probably the fact that people's first PRs are generally not as complex or impacting as their fifth PRs. When people become more capable, they want to work on lower levels of the engine, and those are places that are of a higher risk, that have more stakeholders from our side that need to get involved to investigate whether or not something is dangerous or not, and ultimately these are people adding just riskier changes, and those changes like what folks do have to remember is we're shipping even more so than the modules that we ship on the gallery or secret management or PS read line or any of these kinds of things. Like what we ship in PowerShell 7 is enterprise grade production ready language runtime, right? And that thing has to be rock solid. And actually, this is one of the things that I feel pretty great about over the last couple of years is our quality. And if I'm wrong in feeling great about that, definitely call me out. But if there's, if nothing else, we have been extremely stable in PowerShell 7, despite a large number of changes. And as Steve said, many of them coming from the community going into the thing. And so, there is an inherent conservatism here to making sure that, features getting rushed in don't break people's workflows, right? When they upgrade from 7.0 to 1 and 2. So, yep, need to get there. We're basically out of time. I'm fine running over. If folks want to stay, totally fine. Let's not forget, yep, power to submit PRs on docs as well. Yeah, the Azure Functions one. So there's, there's the, I would say the Azure Functions one may be a misunderstanding potentially of, or miscommunication about where PowerShell documentation is supposed to reside. There is a very large PowerShell developer reference guide for Azure Functions, and I would imagine, or I'd hope, and if they're not, let me know, and I'll go talk to some folks, that they're amenable to seeing some of the changes there, even if they're not necessarily amenable to having those changes exist in the quick start or the sort of tutorials up top. And yes, minimal PowerShell decoupling of subsystems, as Justin's saying, will also help with this long term, right? The ability to operate on these pieces independently, have working groups or even repositories around, specific components rather than everything in a mono repo. Problem is in the bindings documentation. Got it. Okay, interested. We should talk more. Yeah, as Keith said, large percentage of PowerShell downloads are going to DevOps build machines, spin-ups where PowerShell is used for build and test scripts. You do not want to break these folks. And that's exactly where a lot of this comes from. And yeah, some of it is just us moving too slow, but some of it is places where, where we've said no in the past and folks want more specificity around why a change might be rejected. And sometimes it's just, hey, this is a really high risk area of the code that someone needs to spend months deep diving on to fully understand the implications of this change. And we're just not comfortable merging that thing with what we've got, and that the value is not high enough to justify those months of investigation into something like the parameter binder, right? So it's that is, yeah, I'm going in a loop here a little bit, but someone patching core Puppet functionality right now, deeply sympathetic to these points. Thank you, and I appreciate that. And this is ultimately, if there's something I want to leave the community with, it's that we really appreciate this feedback. We appreciate the sort of good faith conversations around this. And I recognize that not all of it has necessarily been good faith, but the fact that we can have folks come on and despite some of these deep-seated frustrations, have what I think is a very constructive conversation, I really appreciate. And I'm really, really grateful to everybody that's, continued to show up and contribute to this community and ecosystem. It's not just about us. It's everything at large. And I've really enjoyed it over the years. So. Awesome. I'm starting to see the questions lag a little bit in the chat. Dave says, is it something like that, a very risky change that needs lots of testing, a great candidate for pre-release builds? Instead of blocking them, couldn't we just get them out for early testing so it's not just your team's or working group's responsibility to try and find all the edge cases? Yes, in some cases. Preview is still something that we want to have a quality bar for. It might not necessarily be as high as production quality, but it's still something that we want people to be able to use and isn't just a mishmash of random stuff. This is why we leverage experimental features. That being said, we still don't want to go down a path where we say, yeah, go for it, do some work to get it in, but we're going to decide later that we don't want to take it. Right. And also we've got a plan for this kind of cliff. When we go to GA right about our first release candidate time, we look at these experimental features and we go, okay, what's going to stay checked in? What are we going to promote to stable? And that effort is not cheap. Right. And so if we take 40 experimental features or whatever, then, that effort is all the more expensive when it comes around to GA time. And it's all the more painful if we end up kicking 30 of them out. Right. So it's double-edged sword a little bit. Pre-release is great. Definitely, we think for things that we probably want or that we even might want, that is the workflow, and this new working group flow leans heavily into experimental features. But it's not just something where we can say that's a sandbox for people to play, have fun. And in fact, one of the things that we do want people to do more is to play in their own sandbox of their own forks, right? And to build these binaries and play with it themselves. Or have, smaller groups of people who are all committed to wanting that thing to play with their forked build and to find out whether that works, right? Real world demonstration absolutely lowers the bar for us to be able to understand the functional aspects of a change and whether or not it's valuable to folks. Might be worth re-reviewing the GitHub issue. I did. re-reviewing?
I took a look through it. I think we touched upon
pretty much got everything.
Yeah. Unless someone wants to call out something specific, I think we covered the themes in the GitHub issue.
And actually, Justin brings up a good point here in the chat. Another aspect here is maintenance, right? Folks can submit code, and it may be even great the day that it's submitted, but they're not necessarily there 2 years from now when there's a bug in the code and no one understands the original code and we can't figure out how to make the fix, right? So, or a security implication, right? God forbid, we get an MSRC notification and it turns out that some code that we took from someone in the community is zero-date us, right? So these are all very real concerns that we deal with, and it's, there's some of that expertise that in some cases, we're the only one providing to some extent, right? SQL is declining PowerShell doc request, saying there's some design limitation. PowerShell can only work with the management plane.
That's definitely wrong. We should just follow up with that, folks. Yeah. I know that even for Azure PowerShell, they've been slowly increasing their coverage of the data plane for Azure.
But I do, one of the things that I would ask to community folks making these requests, and they're seeing some of these things, right? I'd ask for twofold. A little bit of patience with some of these people that may not be as familiar with PowerShell from where they're coming from. Again, company at large, we have a massive internal community of PowerShell folks. Plenty of folks at Microsoft are 100% familiar with PowerShell. Plenty of them are not, just the same way the whole world works, right? So please be patient with them and help them understand what some of these things are that work or don't work. But also, come to us in a productive way, right? Come to us with pointers to these questions, right? We're always open on Twitter to see some of these things. And even if we don't necessarily respond, I promise you I see them, even at 2 a.m. on a Saturday. I look at them all as they scroll through. We'll work with these teams, because I think in a lot of cases, when you see no, this doesn't belong here, you're not seeing, they're not giving you but it does belong over there. But in a lot of cases that exists, that elsewhere is somewhere. And we just need to help you find that spot where that is and where the request actually needs to be made.
Hey, Joey, since we're already over time, Andy, I think you're still on the call. You want to give a quick update on the VS Code extension which was asked? Otherwise, I can talk to it.
Do we have an Andy?
It says he's still there. Maybe busy with something else. So I guess the short version is it is still being worked on. It is the top priority for Andy, and Rob is actually also one of the co-developers on that, in addition to some of the other stuff that he works on. I think the big challenge there is really like the two things. There's the pipeline threading is very complex based on the original code that David Wilson wrote a while back. So we are working through that. The other problem is really the stability of debugging. A large part of that is we created a dependency, or we moved our dependency over to OmniSharp, and a lot of their debugging capabilities are not fully baked yet. So we were kind of like an early adopter. So we're working with that team to see if we can get more stability out of that. So hopefully things will start getting better over time. But it is the top priority for the extension.
Did recording end and I missed it?
I still see it ticking on my screen that is recording.
Yeah, but there's a recording has started in the chat, and I don't know if maybe that just means the files are split, hopefully.
We're probably hitting the limits of Teams.
Yeah. And yeah, as JB said, PNP.PowerShell has been making awesome strides, and a lot of those are officially docked, right? We actually, it's sort of, I don't know exactly how SharePoint wants to call that out, but I think it's sort of second party-ish. But yes, that would be sweet, Justin. You want to write a blog on that? That sounds pretty awesome. Well, I think we're going to call it here, folks. Really appreciate everybody that was able to stay over, and we're really excited, to be making some moves here on some of this working group stuff. And I really just appreciate everybody's patience and engagement, and we want to keep this dialogue going. So. Let's definitely, keep it rolling on Twitter, keep it rolling here. And if anybody thinks of anything else, please let us know.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it. See you folks later.
And join the DSC community call.
Yes. Sorry, Gail. Cut you off.
Thanks, everybody.
No,
Thanks so much.
Cheers. Bye.
Have a good one, folks.